Good evening, everyone. My name is Gino Granato, and today we have an exclusive interview with the legendary broadcaster, 11-time Emmy Award winner, and Seton Hall alumni, Bob Ley. How are you, sir?
It's great to be here. Thank you. You flatter me. Thank you.
Thank you so much for being
please.
here. Because you are a Seton Hall alumni, I wanted to ask, when you got to Seton Hall, did you know you wanted to do broadcasting right away?
Well, the reason I applied to Seton Hall in the beginning, back when dinosaurs roamed the earth in 1972, and Seton Hall was the only school I applied to, was because of the radio station, WSOU, knowing them from the music, knowing them from their sports coverage, and having had some exposure to sports broadcasting through an uncle of mine who worked at ABC Sports, and I had been around the industry. So I did have an interest at that point just in radio, which is what I knew, and I jumped right in at SOU. We used to have freshman orientation in August, and I stopped over the first day we got onto campus for that, for a 3-day weekend. And within 20 minutes, Frank Scafidi had me actually sitting at the board, running the stage. I couldn't sign the logs yet, but hitting cards because I knew how to do that. And so it started even before classes.
That's awesome. So I know you eventually became the director of programming at WSOU. How did you feel during that? Was it a responsibility you wanted to take? Or?
I was sports director, then I was program director. I was fortunate because the way that the distribution of classes fell, there were a lot of seniors when I got here, and I was a freshman, and a bunch of us, but there weren't a lot of juniors and sophomores, so the opportunities in our sophomore year opened up. I became sports director, and we had a chance to make some great trips. We played 3 games that year in Madison Square Garden. We went back to the National Invitation Tournament for the first time in many years. And back then there was no commercial radio contract for Seton Hall basketball, so the only way to follow the Pirates, if you weren't at the game, was to listen to SOU. And as we all know, SOU's coverage, in the tri-state area, millions and millions of potential listeners. And so, you had a sense and you had feedback, and it came through on Hall Line after the games of people following the game, following your comments, and it made you a better broadcaster.
At Seton Hall, what do you think was the biggest game you covered?
I would say back to the NIT against Memphis State, at the end of my sophomore year. That would have been March of '74. We went to, I think, down to the last seconds of regulation. I remember that. And I will always remember from that game, we lost, unfortunately, but Lou Carnesecca, the late Louie, from St. John's, what a gentleman he was. When you broadcast as a student station at the Garden, you were way up top. You weren't quite in the old blue seats, but you were just below them. And I asked Louie before the game if Coach, could you join us for halftime? And he was not a young man even then, climbed all the way from ground floor level all the way up to our broadcast location, a man of his word, to do our halftime show. And just showed you what kind of a guy Louie was. But that game, that was quite a night, because Seton Hall, for the first time in, believe since the early 60s, was back in the NIT.
And they recently made the NIT, and
they won it. The NIT in current day terms is not quite what it used to be. Of course, when Seton Hall won the NIT in 1953, they were national champions, essentially, because of the stature of that tournament.
And a little some disappointing seasons to follow. But what do you think about the Seton Hall basketball team? Do you think they'll bounce back?
Well, they have to improve because there's not a lot of room otherwise. But having said that, I know Shaheen and his staff have put a lot of effort into bringing in a lot of good players. The job descriptions have changed for players, for administrators, and most specifically and drastically for coaches. And my heart bleeds for guys who got into this profession under one paradigm, believing the way things would operate. Now NIL and an endless portal and the ability to go to different schools, and the fact the NCAA really does not really exist. There are regulations, but who's policing them? It makes it a very difficult environment. So, and it's tough to have patience, because when a player proves him or herself, immediately other schools will circle, and maybe you'll have that player for 1 or 2 years, and maybe they'll transfer. So it's a challenging environment. I'm looking forward to to a season where we're going to see a lot more smiles than we saw last year.
Hopefully. I mean, that's the goal.
Yeah.
But I want to now flip to your professional side in sports journalism and broadcasting, and probably your most famous moment is covering the World Series, the earthquake. Take me through what you were feeling when you felt the earthquake strike. What were you feeling in that moment?
October 17th, 1989, 5:04 p.m. Pacific time, on 5 rows from the top of Candlestick Park. About to watch Game 3. It was the pregame, 20-minute pregame or so, between the A's and the Giants. It was the Bay Series. You heard it before you felt it. And then when you felt it, it was like trying to stand on a waterbed, except that's concrete that's shifting under your feet. It only lasted for 15 seconds. People ask, how long did it last? I say, long enough to start a Hail Mary, not necessarily long enough to finish it. But what I am proudest about from that moment is that how, and this predates the days of personal cell phones, we had people scattered throughout Candlestick Park. And we were fortunate because we had diesel power at our truck. And all other power was out. But everybody on our team, producers, directors, camera people, production assistants, audio, knew independent of each other that suddenly we had gone from covering sports to covering a major news story. And without being told, they all converged on the truck. Joe Torre was working with us as an analyst for that series. He said, give me a crew, I'll go out and get some sound. And we were on the air within 18 minutes with the first national pictures of what had happened. Almost 70 people died in that earthquake. Many of them across the bay in Oakland where the freeway just pancaked. It was a horrible tragedy. And we were fortunate because of the circumstances of having power, of my working with an incredible group of creative professionals who knew what to do. But we're all very proud of that day, but also reflective of the fact that it was a tragedy. It really was.
Yeah, any natural disaster, that earthquake. I remember watching it on YouTube and researching, wanting to know more about that topic and seeing what happened. It's just absolutely horrific.
Yeah, it was. And we followed it up the subsequent days of the decision to pause the World Series. The late Fay Vincent, who was then a commissioner, and had just become commissioner a month or so earlier when his predecessor, Bart Giamatti, died suddenly after Pete Rose. It was a very eventful period for Major League Baseball. If you go back and study your history of the year 1989, Pete Rose was banned. The commissioner who banned him died just days after rendering that decision. His successor, Fay Vincent, nobody knew who this gentleman was, and was faced with this unimaginable tragedy of having to decide whether to play the World Series or not. And they paused it for 10 days.
If you were in that situation, you're the commissioner, would you have paused that World
Oh,
Series?
without a doubt, yeah.
Mhm.
I mean,
For that 10-day period?
to have been in, I mean, there was certainly a need at some point, if you could resume the series without impacting relief efforts and and taxing the infrastructure. That was the determination. Mm-hmm. And when they did resume the series after 10 days, the first pitch was simultaneously thrown out by all the first responders, about maybe a couple dozen, all throwing baseballs in at the same time, as everybody would. And it turns out the Oakland A's won that in a 4-game sweep. And frankly, after suspending the series for 10 days and having seen the carnage and the horror of that moment, a lot of folks said, let's cover this and get home as soon as we can.
Mm-hmm. And with your legendary career in broadcasting and journalism, where do you think the industry is heading now?
Oh, gosh.
Advanced technology all
my
over,
God.
AI.
If I knew, I'd be a rich man. Yeah, I'm telling you, because if somebody would ask you 5 years ago, would we be where we're at right now with AI and all these platforms, you couldn't have predicted it. And what we try and do at the Center for Sports Media here on campus is encourage students to develop the suite, S-U-I-T-E, suite of abilities, mm-hmm. the toolbox. You need more tools than when I came into the industry or when our executive director, B.J. Schechter, began his career that led to 20 years at Sports Illustrated. You need to have an understanding of writing, of editing, of storytelling, of the technology that changes, of the platforms, of the finances and the economics of the situation. It's much more complicated. It's not just finding a job. It's finding a job that you are prepared to do. And that all comes down to, my advice to students is to never say no to as many different things as you can, so that you will have that experience and you put all these things into your toolbox. You'll have an understanding where the industry's going. I don't know, but you have to have your head on a swivel, like you're the tail gunner in a B-29 during World War II. You have to be scanning the skies at all times because things change and you have to take those opportunities and be entrepreneurial with your career.
What type of opportunities, when you talk about opportunities, what type of opportunities did you take during your, I know you were involved in WSU, anything else?
While I was still at SOU and still a student at Seton Hall, I was working part-time on weekends at nights at WOR Radio in New York City as a production manager, which is a great opportunity for me. And then I graduated, kept that job, began working over in East Orange at Suburban Cable. So I was working essentially 2 full-time jobs at once. And that's what it takes to create the opportunity such that, while I'm working at Suburban Cable, I find out that the Cosmos need a public address announcer. So there I am at Giant Stadium doing PA for the Cosmos because I've met somebody who is covering the Cosmos through my other job. And so always having your radar attuned to, do I want to do that? I've been offered an opportunity to cover that or to do that or direct that show or to host something that's not quite in sport. Do it. You can only get better from doing it. You might learn to like it. I mean, there are pictures of me somewhere it was the 70s, so I was wearing a leisure suit, if I recall correctly, but anchoring the local cable system's coverage of the 1976 presidential election. And I did that until about 11 o'clock. We signed off, and then I got on a bus, went into New York, and worked overnight at my full-time job. That's the kind, I think, of vision you need to cultivate for yourself. Are there opportunities that I can do? May not pay a lot, may not pay anything, but early on in your career, if you can get the experience and the skills that go with that, that becomes invaluable.
Is there anything you wished you learned while you were at Seton Hall, while you were at your part-time jobs to help you, in your professional career?
I was given a really good basis, a broad-based education, a lot of political science, a lot of history. I enjoyed that. I think it's necessary to understand that, even if you're working in sports, you want to work, if you're fortunate enough, you want to work in sports and you do work in sports, you have to have an understanding of the analogy is to a newspaper, a physical newspaper, if I can go back in time for that, that there's an A section, there's a front. Follow politics, follow your local news, understand, for example, the Seton Hall sports poll, they're about to announce results that might be out by the time this interview airs, about the reaction of people learning that Bad Bunny is doing the halftime entertainment at the Super Bowl. There's some rather interesting results, which then immediately dovetails into why do people feel that way? Is this related to the immigration question? Is this related to criticism from the White House of Bad Bunny, the artist, some of the comments he made? So you have to have a holistic understanding of all of this. And so I got a broad-based education and was encouraged to apply it to all different facets of my career.
Awesome. That's awesome. So I want to imagine this situation. You're back in college. Would you?
By the way, we had a pub on campus when I was in college. Did you know that? At the student
Really?
center. Oh yeah.
That's
Yeah,
awesome.
we had a pub and the drinking age in New Jersey was unwisely 18 for a while. It got raised back.
Why did they get rid of it?
Why did they get rid of the pub?
Yeah, why did they get rid of it?
The same reason they raised the state raised the drinking age. I think sober minds prevailed.
I feel like a lot more people would have attended Seton Hall.
Well,
but
Montclair State had the same. Yeah.
So you're back in college. You have the technology today.
Yeah.
What would
question.
you be doing?
That's a great question. I would be producing things that interest me, that I think would interest followers. I would try to build a social network following. I would try and keep I was reading something in the Setonian about something last week, and somebody told me like 90% of the students at Seton Hall use a social platform. Was it Riz?
Fizz,
excuse me. Okay. And I turned to some friends I was with and nobody, they're old doddering fools like me, but we hadn't heard. It just shows you how new platforms evolve and pop up, and how, you guys might be totally conversant with TikTok and whatnot, and I'm doddering around on Facebook. So all of these platforms, find a platform, find new platforms. Content is king. We've heard that for years. And if it's your content and you own it, and it's well done and it makes a statement, everything else will follow. Don't go out to try and just do hot takes, make a name for yourself, and say outrageous things, because that will only get you so far. It won't. That's not good for the long haul. But if you're doing solid work, you're thinking about where it's airing, what it is, does it have staying power, and how I build off that. That's the formula for success.
So, I want to ask you one last question
Sure.
for this interview. If you had one piece of advice for everyone watching these interviews, especially the Seton Hall students, what would you give everyone?
Be entrepreneurial with your career. I'm a dinosaur. I was 40 years at ESPN with a pension and you know and a 401k and whatnot. And very I modestly say a very successful career. My ambitions grew as the companies did, and I was comfortable there. But that's not going to happen now in this current economy and the way the industry is evolving and going through a revolution. So you need to take charge of your career. You need to take charge of your life and in your career and apply it as aggressively as you can. Do as many, some of this may echo some of the other things I've said, but as many different things as you can. But you are your own boss. Now you may work for someone. You may work for several people. It might be the gig economy. You might have to pay for your own health care. You may not have a suite of personal employee benefits just yet. But take charge, be aggressive, and understand it's on your shoulders to take your education and your value set from here and apply it. And if you do that, you'll end up on top.
What did you mean by a revolution?
The media of 2025 going into 2026 has no relation to 25 years ago. You think back to when ESPN had 110 million viewers in 2010 following the World Cup. And then the cord cutting began, and now it's down at 60, 70 million. If that many people have the power of choice in their hands, they have all of these streaming services, they have all of these sources of information. It is a fire hose of content. If you're a consumer, you've never been in a better place because you can pick and choose, and some of it you have to subscribe to, some of it's free. But if you are a content creator, you're competing in that fire hose. So how do you make it different? And that's the revolution. I mean, it's everything's been turned on its side. But you know what? You don't have to be 35 years old to be making an impact in the industry. You can do it in your early 20s if you have the right idea, the right platform, and the right execution.
Awesome. Wow. Thank you for that.
My
advice.
pleasure.
But thank you for everyone for tuning in. Thank you, Bob,
My
for
pleasure.
an
Good to
amazing interview.
Good to see you again.
And to everyone watching, have a great and blessed day, and we'll catch you on the next episode.